She walked into the room like she had done 1,000 times before. But this time something felt different. The air was heavy, the smiles were too polite. The contract waiting on the table wasn't just paper. It was a trap dressed in ink. They thought she wouldn't notice. They thought she'd just sign, like she always did. No questions, no hesitation, no fight. After all, what choice did she have? No lawyer. No power, no one on her side. Just a mother, a woman. A name they thought they could erase with a signature. But as her eyes scanned the page, something changed in her. Her hands didn't shake. Her lips didn't tremble. But the storm behind her silence was about to burn every lie in that room to the ground. And when she finally looked up, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She said one word that shattered their lies and exposed everything. This is not just her story. This is the moment a woman refused to sign away her worth and rewrote the ending they never saw coming. They handed her the pen like it was a gift. Like they were doing her a favor, like she was supposed to smile, say thank you, and just sign, but she didn't. She stared at the paper for a long moment, too long. The room was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a thunderstorm, a fake peace hiding real damage. She held the contract in her hands like it might burn her. Her fingers didn't tremble, but her eyes, they held back 1,000 things she wasn't ready to say. Not yet. Across the table, they were watching her, waiting, one with a smile, the other with that empty legal stare, the kind of stare that counts people as numbers, that sees pain as paperwork. They thought she would sign it. Of course she would. What else could she do? She had no lawyer, no support, no one in her corner. She was supposed to be grateful they even gave her an offer at all. That's what they believed. That's what they bet on. That's what everyone thought, but they didn't know what she had survived to get here. They didn't know the nights she didn't eat so her child could. They didn't know the job interviews where she was ignored, the rooms where she was talked over, the moments where she was told to be quiet and smile. They didn't know the cost of her silence. She had been silent for too long. She was the girl who always did the right thing, the woman who never made a scene, the mother who swallowed her pride to keep the peace. She learned how to endure. She learned how to keep her head down, but somewhere along the line, she stopped recognizing the person in the mirror. Until today, something in her changed. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even revenge. It was truth. And once truth wakes up inside you, it doesn't go back to sleep. They tapped the table softly, reminding her. Just a signature, they said. Then we can all move on. Move on from what? From the lies, from the manipulation, from pretending this contract wasn't built on betrayal. She looked up slowly, and for the first time they noticed it. That her silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was power. She placed the pen down, folded her hands calmly, and with a voice that didn't shake, she spoke. This is a forgery. The words hung in the air like thunder. No screaming, no drama, just truth. And with that one sentence, everything changed. The smile vanished from his face. The mask shattered. The room, once cold and calculated, suddenly felt hot. What did you say? He asked. But he already knew. She pointed at the paragraph, the one they hoped she wouldn't read, the one they rewrote behind closed doors, the one that erased her rights. She had read every word, twice, 3 times. Not because she didn't understand, but because she wanted them to know. She saw them, every lie, every trick, every line written to make her feel small. It was all right there, and she was done pretending she didn't see it. You thought I would sign this, she said softly. You thought I'd be scared, desperate, alone, that I wouldn't read it carefully, that I wouldn't ask questions, that I wouldn't fight, but you were wrong. She slid the contract back across the table. Not torn, not crumpled, but untouched, like something rotten she refused to carry. He leaned back, the arrogance in his eyes turned to calculation. He was already thinking about damage control, already rehearsing the lies, already wondering how to spin the narrative. But she didn't care. She wasn't here to win a battle in their boardroom. She had already won something bigger, herself. The version of her who used to smile politely while swallowing her pain. She didn't exist anymore. The version who used to let others decide her worth. She was gone too. What sat across from them now was a woman who had lost everything, except her voice, and today, that voice tore down a lie they spent months building. "You forged my signature on the last version," she said. "I have proof, and you know I do." For the first time, they didn't speak, no defense, no excuses, because they knew, and they knew she knew. Sometimes, the strongest thing a person can do isn't scream. It's refuse to sign what was never right to begin with. She stood up, slow and steady, the pen still on the table, her hands empty, but her heart full, not with revenge, with clarity, with strength, with that quiet kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself. She walked out not as a victim, not as a problem, but as a woman who saw through the lies and had the courage to call them out. They thought she would sign it, but instead, she signed something they never expected, her own beginning. She walked out of that room not just without a signature, she walked out without their chains, and in that silence behind her, she knew she had finally become someone they couldn't manipulate anymore. But her story didn't begin at that table. It didn't begin with the contract or the lie. It began long before in a world that had taught her to accept less. She used to believe people meant well, that if she just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, smiled enough, things would work out. But the world doesn't always reward goodness. Sometimes it preys on it, and they had preyed on her. It started with trust, a handshake, a promise, a subtle nod that said, "We'll take care of you." And for a while, she believed it. They made her feel chosen, valuable, like she was lucky to be in the room at all. But behind every compliment was a condition, behind every opportunity, a trap. They dangled promotions, ownership, percentages. "Just sign here, just let the lawyers finalize it. Don't worry, we'll handle the details." And when she asked questions, they smiled. When she hesitated, they made her feel ungrateful. That's how manipulation works. Not with force, with favors, not with anger, with smiles, until one day, the truth bled through the cracks. An email she wasn't supposed to see, a clause she didn't remember agreeing to, a whisper from someone who had been silenced before. The fog began to lift. What she thought was a partnership was paperwork designed to erase her. What she thought was a future was a cage in legal disguise. They never wanted her to rise, they wanted her to depend. And the worst part, she almost believed them, almost signed, almost gave up her fight in exchange for a seat at a table that was never really hers. But that one word, forgery, that wasn't just about a contract. It was about everything they forged, her trust, her place, her worth. They had written her out of the story until she took the pen back, and now they weren't just dealing with a woman who caught a lie. They were facing a woman who survived betrayal and came back smarter, because she didn't walk out of that room to disappear. She walked out to build something they couldn't destroy. The next morning, the silence didn't last. Her phone lit up. Emails, calls, requests for meetings. Suddenly they wanted to talk, clarify, resolve the misunderstanding, but she didn't return their calls. She was busy preparing evidence, busy talking to real lawyers, busy putting together everything she'd kept quiet about for too long, because she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. This was bigger. How many others had they done this to? How many women had walked into those rooms and signed away their voice? How many had been told, "It's just business," when it was really betrayal in disguise? She wasn't just fighting for her name. She was fighting for every woman who had ever been silenced, used, cornered, and called difficult, for asking what she deserved, and that gave her something no contract ever could: unshakable purpose. When she released her statement, it wasn't a scream. It was calm, precise, documented, every line backed with proof. She didn't beg for sympathy. She presented truth, and truth, when spoken without fear, is the loudest sound in the world. Within days, everything changed. Their company's name hit the headlines not because of her, but because of what they did. Whispers became voices, others came forward. People who were too afraid before now had the courage to speak, all because one woman said no. She never wanted fame, she didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. She wanted people to know. That's the thing about power. They thought they had it all, but real power doesn't live in contracts. It lives in conscience. It lives in character. And it lives in people brave enough to walk away when the world expects them to bow. They had no idea what she carried inside her. They thought silence meant surrender. They thought politeness meant obedience. They thought fear would keep her in place, but they were wrong. Her silence wasn't fear, it was observation. Her kindness wasn't weakness, it was strength with restraint. And her refusal to sign, that was the first domino, because when one woman exposes a lie, she gives the rest of the world permission to look closer. And now, they weren't just defending a contract, they were defending every lie that came before it, while she was already writing the next chapter, and this time, no one else would hold the pen. They never thought it would end like this, not with their names in the headlines, not with their carefully built empire trembling under the weight of truth, not because of her. But that's the thing about truth, it doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives in silence, in moments, in whispers that grow into thunder. And now, the storm they tried to bury had a name, her. She didn't go back to the life she had before. She didn't want it. Because that version of her life, the one built on appeasement, survival, pretending, was never really hers. She built something new from scratch, no contracts, no silent compromises, just courage, just voice. They thought she was replaceable, expendable, a signature away from being forgotten. But what they didn't realize is you can erase someone from your paperwork, but you can't erase them from their purpose. And once she stepped into hers, nothing was ever the same again. She began speaking, not shouting, speaking, calm, clear, with fire that didn't need to scream to burn. People listened, and not just because of what happened to her, but because they saw themselves in her. People who'd been silent, who'd been dismissed, who'd been told that's just how it is. They started remembering what it felt like to matter. Her story wasn't a scandal, it was a spark, a reminder that you don't need a crowd to begin. You just need one moment, one word, one choice not to sign your name where your soul doesn't belong. And that made all the difference. The company, they tried everything, spin the narrative, call her emotional, say she misunderstood, blame a clerical error, but it was too late. The world had already seen what they tried to hide. Because she didn't just expose a forgery, she exposed a culture of quiet control, of polite erasure, of false empowerment. And in doing that, she did something even more powerful. She freed others to begin. She started getting messages from women across the country, mothers, students, entrepreneurs, all saying the same thing. I thought it was just me. But now they knew they weren't alone. Because of her, they started reading the fine print of their own lives. They started questioning the contracts they signed every day without a pen, the emotional deals, the unspoken expectations, the silent apologies they kept making for just being who they were. Her one no became 1,000 people's yes. Yes to respect, yes to boundaries, yes to rising, and somewhere along the way, she stopped being just the woman who exposed the forgery. She became a blueprint, a map for how to leave the room without leaving yourself behind. Because that's what it really was about. Not contracts, not legal terms, but dignity, truth, self, worth, and in a world so quick to hand out deals that make you smaller, quieter, more obedient, she reminded us all. You don't have to accept every offer that lands in front of you, especially when it comes at the cost of your soul. The same people who once said she'd regret it, now quoted her words, the same faces that once dismissed her, now used her strength to inspire their teams. That's how full circle moments happen, not through revenge but through redefinition. She didn't destroy them, she outgrew them, because real power doesn't chase validation. It stands in truth and lets the world catch up. She walked back into that same building, but this time she wasn't the one waiting for approval. She was the one giving opportunities, starting initiatives, building something cleaner, something better. People asked her how she did it, how she didn't break, how she stayed calm. She said, "Because I finally knew I was no longer asking for permission to exist." Let that sink in. She stopped asking, she started being. They thought she would sign it, they thought she would settle, they thought she would vanish, but instead, she spoke one word that changed everything, and then she let her actions finish the story. Years from now, they won't remember her because she walked away. They'll remember her because she walked away with her head high, her voice steady, and her soul untouched. They'll remember her not as the woman who refused to sign, but as the woman who refused to be silenced. Because the truth is, she didn't just say one word that day. She said 1,000 words with her eyes, her stillness, her courage. She said, "I know who I am, I know what I deserve, and I'm not afraid anymore." And the world heard her, not because she screamed louder than everyone else, but because her voice carried something most people have forgotten how to carry: conviction. They thought they had broken her, that they had drained the fight from her bones. But all they did was awaken the woman who had spent years quietly learning every corner of the game. Now she was no longer playing it. She was rewriting it. You see, there's something about people who have tasted silence for too long. When they finally speak, they shake the ground beneath them. And when she did, others followed. What began as one contract became a movement. What began as one word became a voice for many. Because sometimes the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more truth, tellers, people who are willing to lose what's fake in order to protect what's real. And that's what she did. She didn't just expose a forgery in ink, she exposed the quiet ways people are asked to shrink, to compromise, to sign things that betray their value, just to survive. But not her. Not anymore. She taught us all something we forgot, that walking away is sometimes braver than staying, that no is not weakness, it's the sound of someone reclaiming their story. And maybe that's what this was all along. Not a fight, not revenge, but a rebirth. She didn't need applause. She didn't need validation. All she needed was to believe that she was enough without their signature. So if you're watching this and you're at your own table, pen in hand, heart full of fear, and they're smiling at you, waiting for you to settle, just remember her. Remember what she chose, and know this: you are not here to sign your silence. You are here to speak your worth. And you never need a signature to prove who you are. Let the world write what it wants, but never forget you hold the pen.